Two strikes that killed 23 civilians during Somali military operations supported by Turkish drones must be investigated as war crimes, Amnesty International said today. Civilians killed in the strikes on March 18, 2024 included 14 children, 5 women, and 4 men. Another 17 civilians were injured in the strikes, 11 children, 2 women, and 4 men. All are from the marginalized Gorgar clan. The strikes hit the Jaffi farm, about 3 kilometers west of Baghdad village in the lower Shabelle region, between 8 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. Victims and other residents told Amnesty International that the drone strikes followed heavy ground fighting that started earlier that day between the armed group Al-Shabaab and Somali security forces close to the villages of Jambalul and Baghdad. The Somali and Turkish governments must investigate these deadly strikes as a war crime, Tigra Haguda, Amnesty International's regional director for East and Southern Africa. The Somali and Turkish governments must investigate these deadly strikes as a war crime and put an end to reckless attacks on civilians, said Tigra Haguda, Amnesty International's regional director for East and Southern Africa. In Somalia, civilians have borne the brunt of suffering in war far too often. These horrific deaths must not be overlooked. The devastated survivors and their families deserve truth, justice, and reparations. Amnesty International remotely interviewed 12 people, including 4 victims and eyewitnesses, and 4 family members of victims. Researchers also reviewed satellite imagery and medical reports, analyzed photos of victims and weapons fragments, and geolocated videos from the scene of the attacks and of Turkish drone operations at Mogadishu International Airport. Based on the photos of the munition scrap metal, Amnesty International's weapons investigator was able to confirm that the strike was conducted with MAML glide bombs, which are dropped from TB-2 drones. Both are manufactured by Turkey. Attacks that fail to differentiate between military objectives and civilian objects are indiscriminate and may amount to war crimes. Deadly strikes. According to an eyewitness interviewed by Amnesty International, Al-Shabaab fighters were present in Baghdad during clashes on March 18. An initial drone strike hit a mosque in the eastern side of Baghdad at around 7:30 p.m., destroying the building and damaging nearby houses. Amnesty International was not able to independently verify who was targeted in the mosque or if there were any casualties. Following that attack, eyewitnesses said many civilians fled to the Jaffi farm to seek refuge. The first strike on the farm killed and injured several civilians. A second attack, approximately 30 minutes later, killed and injured more civilians who had arrived from the neighboring villages of Alafo and Galgub to rescue survivors following the first strike. On March 19, Somalia's Ministry of Information issued a statement saying that they had killed over 30 Al-Shabaab militants in the villages of Baghdad and Balduska in coordination with international partners. The statement added, "The operation was launched in response to intelligence reports indicating that Al-Shabaab fighters were gathering in these areas and planning an assault against the Somali people. 15 Al-Shabaab members were killed in an airstrike in Baghdad. It is unclear whether Turkish or Somali forces were in control of the TB-2 drone at the time of the strikes on Jaffi farm." One source in the Somali government told Amnesty International that members of the National Intelligence and Security Agency fly the TB-2s during combat operations against Al-Shabaab. However, in 2022, the UN panel of experts for Somalia reported that, according to the Turkish government, Turkey did not transfer the drones to Somalia in violation of the UN arms embargo, but rather operates the drones themselves in the fight against terrorism. Also in 2022, Ahmed Malam Fiki, Somalia's then interior minister who is now foreign minister, was reported to have said that while Turkish forces operate the drones, Somali commanders provide the targets. In recent years, Turkey has provided military equipment and support to Somalia. Satellite imagery and videos geolocated by Amnesty International's Crisis Evidence Lab show Turkish TB-2 drones on the runway at Mogadishu International Airport as early as September 12, 2022. After years of training the Gorger unit of the Somali Armed Forces at Turkey's Camp Turksam in Mogadishu, the two countries signed a defense and economic cooperation framework agreement in February 2024. On April 5, Amnesty International sent letters to the governments of Somalia and Turkey asking for details on the March 18 operation, including which military's forces were controlling the drone at the time of the strikes. At the time of publication, neither government had replied. There were screams, blood, and bodies all over the ground. Amnesty International established that a total of 5 families belonging to the Gorgart clan were impacted by the 2 strikes on the Jaffe farm. Mailamadan Hussein Hassan Adaw, a 49-year-old farmer, lost his wife, Asli Bul Hassan, 40, his son Tahir Mailamadan, 14, and his 2 daughters Ishwak Mailamadan, 7, and Asma Mailamadan, 6. His 2 nephews Abdi Ibrahim Dukau, 7, and Sulla Ibrahim Dukau, 9, were also killed. His 30-year-old sister Fadumo Hussein Hassan Adaw suffered a head injury and later died in Digfir Hospital in Mogadishu. Mailamadan Hussein Hassan Adaw said he could not understand why his family was targeted. He told Amnesty International, "My wife, my 3 children and 2 nephews were all killed in the first strike that hit the farm. I was in Afgoy at the time. I immediately received a phone call from my relatives. It was not possible to travel at night for security reasons. I traveled to Baghdad the morning of the following day. I identified the bodies of my wife and children at the scene. My wife and children were buried in one mass grave in Gailgub village, while my nephews were buried in Alifo village. I don't know why my family was targeted during the holy month of Ramadan. I am heartbroken. I don't know why my family was targeted during the holy month of Ramadan. I am heartbroken." Mailamadan Hussein Hassan Adaw, whose wife and 3 children were killed. Ismail Ali Diri, a 37-year-old farmer, and his son Saddam Ismail Ali Diri, age 9, were also killed. His wife, 2 daughters, 2 sons and nephew were injured and received care at hospitals in Mogadishu. Muhammad Ali Diri, Ismail's elder brother, told Amnesty International, "I was in Alifo village. We heard a deafening blast. Soon after, I received news that my brother Ismail had been struck by a drone attack. My son and I hurried to the farm. Upon reaching the farm, another blast targeted us, covering the area in a cloud of dust. The scene was chaotic. There were screams, blood, and bodies all over the ground. I luckily survived, but my 22-year-old son, Ali Muhammad Ali Diri, who was with me, was seriously injured in his back. My brother Ismail and his son were brutally killed." A relative of another family who lost 6 people, including 3 children, said, "I am horrified by what happened to my relatives. This is inhumane. This is a massacre." The Somali government has a history of not providing reparations for civilian casualties of military actions, or seeking reparations from foreign actors when they are involved in unlawful attacks. It also has a history of ignoring violations against marginalized communities, such as the Gorgart clan. An elder from the Gorgart clan said, "We feel neglected and unheard, with no one advocating for us or engaging in dialogue with us. There has been no explanation provided for the actions taken against my people, no follow-up investigations, and no offer of sympathy. Our priority is to receive information about why this tragic event occurred. We also need compensation for the losses we have suffered." Background: the armed conflict between the government of Somalia and Al-Shabaab continues to have a devastating impact on the country's civilian population, with all parties to the conflict committing serious violations of international humanitarian law. Amnesty International has documented a series of airstrikes by the United States Africa Command, AFRICOM, that have killed and injured Somali civilians, including many as a result of apparent violations of international humanitarian law. On April 5, Amnesty International wrote to AFRICOM, asking if U.S. forces were involved in the March 18 operation against Al-Shabaab, but they did not reply by the time of publication.